Hi to everyone in the Science Gallery. Sorry, I'm not there, but I'm in Limerick at the moment, so there might be a delay on this satellite feed. I'm sure it'll all go swimmingly because you have Dil in charge, and she is my favourite power lesbian. I'm actually really, glad to see an event like this happening because obviously the whole HIV something that has affected me personally. I was diagnosed in '95, and the issues around AIDS then were very different, but now we're in sort of a whole new landscape. But some of those same issues linger, so to speak, because nowadays, even though we're lucky to live in a country where we have great, relatively good health care and they look after us, and most people living with HIV are in the same position that I am here, which is that I take my magic pill and continue on with my life, and I expect to be living as long and as healthily as anyone else. But that sort of information is slow to reach the general public. And not only the general public, sadly I have to say, even the gay community, who should be more informed, are very slow to catch up with the developments. And so for me personally, the thing that bothers me still most is the sort of stigma and shame around living with HIV. First of all, I think in this country we have a long and storied history of shaming people for their sexual behavior, and in the past that has led to sort of mother and baby homes and mass graves, and today we still try to shame people for their sexual behavior, and people living with HIV sort of bear the brunt of that sometimes, I think. Also, there is still a stigma about it, and so that has a sort of a two-pronged effect that worries me greatly. One is, of course, that it makes it difficult for people who are living with HIV. It's very difficult to be keeping something like that to yourself. With other conditions, you get to be open about it, and people are, sympathetic or whatever. But a lot of people living with HIV are sort of keeping it to themselves, and it's a big thing. And it's a psychologically difficult and distressing thing to be keeping something like that to yourself. But more importantly, for me, what bothers me most about that is the sort of stigma and shaming around living with HIV, and the fear that the general public still have of it, ends up in a situation where people are afraid to go and get tested because they would prefer not to know. They sort of want to bury their heads in the sand about it. And that's actually where the real danger lies, because the spread of HIV, and unfortunately we get a lot of infections at the moment, a lot of that to do is the fact that people are not tested and they don't know their status. And if people weren't so afraid of what the result might be, I think they'd be much more likely to go and get tested. So all of that fear and that sort of shaming that is very obvious sometimes, especially if you're openly HIV and you're on the internet, let me tell you, you get a lot of crap. It's that sort of stuff that stops people from going to get tested. And so that's sort of the real big issue for me. Of course, also, as someone living with HIV, the sort of stigma around it bothers me on a personal level. But on a sort of a broader level, it's that sort of fear preventing people from going to get tested. And of course, people who have not been tested and don't know their HIV status are where the danger lies, because people like that are more likely to be tempted into unsafe sex practices because some part of them thinks it's all okay. So I hope you have a great day. I hope the discussions are good. I hope we have lots of contributions from people who are actually living with HIV, because I think it's important to hear their voices, and hopefully there will come a time when people living with HIV feel totally able to be open about it. So have a great day, and bye from me and Penny. She's totally cool with HIV.
Brilliant, what a great start for the discussion. Rory O'Neill for president. Sorry? Yeah, I know. You kind of said it all, didn't we? Yeah. I just want to say I'm going to get business cards printed tomorrow. Dil Wickremasinghe, power lesbian. I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, so you're all very welcome to today's discussion. We're going to be spending the next hour talking about HIV as part of obviously the the blood exhibition, which is not for the faint-hearted. I should have not had a sandwich before I came in to see the exhibition. I really regret that. So we are going to be talking about HIV because, after all, 35 million people are infected with HIV. In Ireland, the figures last year, 344 were newly diagnosed. So it's obviously very, very relevant. We are going to explore HIV and how it has impacted on us individually, but also culturally speaking. We'll be looking at also how our relationship with HIV has evolved over the years, and we'll also look at what is life like for someone who is living with HIV now and who's maybe newly diagnosed now. And we'll be looking a lot at the preventative measures that are there in relation to HIV, both in Ireland and globally. So we have a fantastic panel who are real experts in the area of HIV. So I'd love to introduce them to you. So we're all the way from Holland. He just flew over especially to speak to us, is Leo Schenk, who is the founder of Poz&Proud, and that's a gay men's group within the Dutch HIV Association, which was founded in 2006. And he is also the editor-in-chief of Hello Gorgeous, this magazine here, which is probably, there's not many magazines in the world that are really focusing on HIV, and most of the people who write in it are HIV positive or have been affected by HIV. So have a look at that. Now, it is in Dutch, unfortunately. We're hoping that maybe you might bring it to Ireland. And then we also have, I think this man needs no introduction whatsoever. He's an icon in the Irish LGBT community. It's Tonie Walsh. Tonie Walsh, of course, is the founder of the Irish Queer Archive. And of course, speaking of magazines, he was the founding editor of the GCN, which is the Gay Community News. So can I ask you to welcome them to our discussion today? So Leo came from Holland and Amsterdam, and Tony, you drove up from Tipperary, isn't that right? And it took him longer to get over here. Apparently, the traffic was.
It took me longer to get from Clonmel to Dublin than it took Leo to get from Schiphol to here.
So first of all, very quickly, when did you first hear about HIV? How old were you? Where were you?
It was 1985. I guess a lot of people remember that moment as well. That was the time that Rock Hudson was diagnosed with AIDS and died of it that same year. Before that, it was seen as only mainly gay disease. But with Rock Hudson dying of it, there was this icon, this famous actor that died of HIV, and then it totally blew out of proportion in America as well. All the straight people were also afraid of getting it. So I was living in Urk at that moment. There's a small, used to be an island, a small place in the Netherlands. I was, let me see, almost 20. Yes.
So that was only a couple of years ago, right, Leo?
Yeah, 2 years.
And when did HIV really come, I suppose, manifest itself in your life as opposed to hearing it in the media?
That was 1995 with Rock Hudson in 85. Did you mean the moment that I got my diagnosis? Okay. We call it HIV years, 17 years now. I got my diagnosis in 1997. 1997, yeah. And I got the AIDS diagnosis. That's the last phase of an HIV infection. In Holland, it was discouraged to get tested for a long time. So actually, nobody knew their status. That was done because mostly there were no effective treatment, of course, but also the fear of stigma. The safe sex message at that point was to pretend like everybody is HIV positive, so use a condom. Which was in a way good for fighting stigma as well, because in Holland the parent stigma was not that big, but it also related into guys like me who walked on too long and ended up in the hospital with AIDS diagnosis.
And the same question to you, Tony.
I was really lucky that I was politically involved with National LGBT Federation. I still keep calling it by its 80s name, National Gay Federation. So I would have been, I'm a couple of years older than Leo, so around the early 80s, around the age of 20 or 21. because we were running Dublin's LGBT community centre, we were, I mean, it was, in hindsight, it was terrific. We were able to educate ourselves from a mass of international print media, mainly Canadian and US lesbian gay magazines that were actually coming in, talking about the advent of this new disease. It's been called gay plague and whatever else at the time. So we were particular, and we were documenting it as well. In fact, all of that documentation is now in the Irish Career Archive in the National Library. We were quite au fait with also picking up references to it, and rather hysterical references to it in the Irish print media at the time. I mean, we have to remind ourselves that we're talking about a cultural and social environment in the early mid-80s where condoms were still illegal, where it was the society and the government was so enthralled to a rather dubious religious ideology and morality that it was very difficult to have any type of national conversation around sexual behaviour and what would later be described as safer sex practices, eventually when AIDS did become an issue. But I think I suppose I would have been 23 or 24, a year or two before Rock Hudson died, and I thought, okay, if you're sexually active, you should go and get tested once or twice a year, because that's what this gay organisation I'm a part of says you should do. And I roll up into this room, and there's a lot of nervous, sheepish-looking people sitting in this common space. It's like a dole office, and you have to go up to a receptionist and actually discuss your entire sexual history with everybody behind, sort of rubbernecking. I thought, this is just absolutely appalling. And that was a sort of culture in Ireland at the time. Unlike Leo, when it comes to sort of my own positive status, I'm a sort of pos baby in years term. I became positive. I'm a walking cliche. I break up with my boyfriend and I go out and I shag around anyway, be whatever. I'm not going to be moralistic about it. And anyway, became positive in 2005.
I like to say you're a pause baby. Yeah, pause baby. Yeah, that's right. So that was obviously the 80s and the 90s, and now here we are, 2014. How has our relationship with HIV evolved? And I think obviously we'll hear it from an Irish perspective, but from a Dutch perspective.
Well, the biggest breakthrough in HIV, of course, became with the arrival of the antiretroviral treatments, the combination therapies. That was 1996. That gave back our lives. I was diagnosed in 97, so that was a year later. So I had my life. But also that changed a lot, because I was telling about the stigma that was not so perseverant in the Netherlands after 1996. HIV-positive gay men became sexually active in the scene again. They chose, also there was a group of them that chose for serosorting, that was having sex, mostly unprotected sex, with other positive men. But at that time, there was a real no-go. And then the stigma really got hard and vicious. Before the combination therapy, the people living with HIV were seen as victims, and after that they were offenders. There were a lot of court cases against people living with HIV who hadn't explained their status to a person that they went to bed with beforehand, straight as well as gay persons. Barebacking became a synonym for infecting other people purposely. I founded Poz&Proud in 2006, and that was a really bad time at that point. In the media, we were seen as sex monsters, and if anybody had HIV at that point, it was their own fault. So there was a lot of blaming, shaming, etc., etc. Yeah.
Very much what Rory O'Neill was saying about the shaming element of it, and that was you said 2009.
2006 then.
2006.
Yeah,
so it's pretty
yeah.
recent. Pretty
True,
recent.
Yeah.
And from an Irish context point of view, how has Ireland, I suppose, their relationship with HIV changed?
Well, paradoxically, we came from a starting point where I mentioned the sort of prevailing orthodoxy of shame towards all facets of sexual health and sexual behaviour. Paradoxically, we started from a point where there was a huge worry amongst health educators, frontline health educators and LGBT activists at the time, that we were setting ourselves up in the mid-80s to a major pool of infection in Ireland. And I think as a result of that, people galvanised their efforts, doubled their efforts and worked really hard. And I think it's never been fully acknowledged, the work, and especially the volunteer work, of an extraordinary number of people, some of them whom are still working. I'm thinking of people like Mick Quinlan, people who are still working in the field of sexual health education today, and specifically around HIV and AIDS. But I actually think as a result of that work, we managed to head off what could have been a much bigger problem. And we stopped. I mean, I lost track at somewhere around 50, the number of friends and lovers who died of AIDS in Dublin, New York, and London. But I actually think that figure would have been much greater. And we did, for my generation, I'm 54, we actually headed off a lot. We headed off and avoided a lot more destruction. But we also led the charge when it came to influencing government attitudes and behaviour. I mean, it's extraordinary. I was downstairs before the meeting. I was just reminiscing to our team about how Ireland's first Gay Health Action Group, it was called GHA, the first group to campaign around HIV and AIDS in the mid-80s, was responsible for producing the first ever information leaflets in the country, not just aimed at gay people, but at worried heterosexuals. And extraordinarily, when this very same group in 1985 went to the government, to the Department of Health, to fund a second series of information leaflets for the whole country, the government's solicitor or attorney general advised the Department of Health that if they funded it, they could be seen and accused of promoting criminal behaviour, because of course sex between men was a criminal offence at the time. So the Department of Health said, sorry guys, we're not doing it. Go off and find the money somewhere else. It was quite extraordinary. That's the type of culture. So I think it is, on a positive note, I think it's extraordinary that we managed, somewhere along the line, people managed out of their own resources and volunteerism and donations and everything to get the information out. Of course, something changed along the way, because we now have, as we can see from the figures, a rapid increase an extraordinary increase in new infections, and particularly amongst baby gays, the sort of 19 to 25-year-old cohort.
That's my next question in relation to stigma. Where are we in relation to people disclosing their status, their HIV status, and also where are we when it comes to actually getting tested? Because I know here in Ireland, out of the 344 that were newly diagnosed last year, over half of them had been living with it for long periods before they were even aware of it. So you don't know how many people were infected during that time. So Leo, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the medicines gave back my life, and I think in general, people living with HIV have a high quality of life now. But the biggest threat for their health is stigma. And that comes up from people not knowing about HIV, being scared about HIV. And it also returns back into self-stigma. So I think in Holland we see not many people disclosing their status. And in the time where we have these court cases, maybe there was a reason to not maybe disclose your status, because you could get jailed for it. But in 2007, that ended, that prosecution. Now, there's actually no reason why you should not tell people that you're HIV, apart from the stigma.
And Tonie?
I wrote an article about the first time I came out, when I discovered my Poz status, and I was working with Rory O'Neill, setting up a club. In fact, apart from my Ukrainian boyfriend, the second person I told was Rory, and he had the completely right attitude. He said, "Where were you? You're late. You're hours late." I said, "I was up in James's," and he said, "And?" I said, "Yeah, I just got my results." He said, "And?" I said, "I'm positive," and he said, without even missing a heartbeat, "About fucking time." And I thought, well, that's just the sort of reaction and attitude I really need to hear at this point, because I don't want to be browbeat by shame and awfulness and sort of bury myself into a trough of despair. I'm just quite extraordinary.
Yeah. We have a lot of role models coming out as HIV positive. Is there a well-known person in Ireland that's
Rory.
Rory is the most, yeah, okay.
I do think, certainly in Ireland, in complete contrast to the Netherlands, we still have, for whatever reason, we live in a culture where we have a very unhealthy relationship with our bodies and sexual behaviour.
Amen to that. But bring it even more forward to today. You know, what's life like for people who are being diagnosed now and living with HIV, and from a point of view also people who are actively trying to, you know, prevent from themselves from contracting HIV.
Well, I was talking earlier about the biggest breakthrough, that being the combination therapy. In 2008, the second biggest breakthrough came. That was when a group of Swiss HIV experts came out with this, what we call the Swiss statement. Has anybody heard of the Swiss statement? Hands? Yeah, you, I know. Yeah. Well, that's a shame, because it's very important for the fight against HIV, but also for how we look at people living with HIV. Those Swiss experts, HIV experts, said that when you're successfully treated for HIV, you cannot infect another person. And I leave out the STD because the partner study also showed that even with an STI, that doesn't mean anything really in terms of infectiousness. But I'm treated well. My viral load is undetectable. That means that there are less than 50 copies of this virus in my blood. That's really not enough to infect you, and I cannot infect you even if I would, and I wouldn't, of course. But and that message has been largely discussed in the HIV field, professional field, but not outside. That's really the reason why people should get tested. You know, if you not know your status, go test it, get tested. And if you're HIV positive, get treatment, because treatment will make you less infectious or not infectious for the rest. And in that way, that's a certain...
that feeds into the stigma as well.
Right, yeah.
It would lessen the stigma.
Yeah, precis. In the Netherlands, we have 21,000 HIV-infected persons who are in treatment, but there is an estimate figure of 9,000 people that are HIV positive but do not know they're HIV positive because they have never been tested. And that's largely due to the fact that people are... That's what Rory also said. That's largely due to the fact that people are scared of being HIV positive, you know, and also this group, there was a model in the Netherlands presented. This group of people who are HIV positive but don't know they're HIV positive account for 90% of the new infections. So if we can get that group to be tested, then we are a step closer to the end of HIV.
Absolutely.
Could I add? I do think, though, we need to, much like sort of how we deliver the message around responsible behaviour, and that has to be constantly reevaluated and re-edited. I do think we need to pony up new ways of actually encouraging people to go and get tested, encouraging people, saying to people, okay, if you're going to have more than one partner in a year or 10 years or whatever, but if you're going to have more than one partner, then it behoves you to go out and from time to time go and actually have regular STI tests, not just for HIV, but for all the other stuff. But if people are reluctant, for whatever reasons, in the Netherlands as much as Ireland, I mean, two developed countries in Europe, if they're reluctant or for whatever reason to go into a clinic, then it behoves frontline educators like Leo and also, say, the Department of Health or whatever, to imagine sexy, seductive ways, to actually persuasive ways to get people tested. And of course, going out and testing people in clubs and bars, which has been tried from time to time. It's been tried in Dublin, it's been tried in Belfast, it's been tried umpteen times in Amsterdam. Maybe that's the way to go. Figure out other ways. If people aren't going to go down to their local clinic, how do we get them to do it, you know?
But most of all, we need positive role models. You know, people living with HIV, that will show that that life is not over when you are tested HIV positive. You know.
Yeah, because in Ireland, the only person I can think of is Rory O'Neill. There's no person from the heterosexual community who is open about their HIV status, and I think that's that's a shame as well, because I think it needs to be across the board, because I think people still in Ireland have this image of what a person who's HIV positive looks like, you know. So let's open it up to the floor. You've been very patient and very quiet, except for Andrew. Do you have any comments? Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask Leo and Tonie?
I just want to say this has been a really fantastic talk, and this is I think this is really the first time since I've been living in Dublin I've heard anything like this, and so I just want to thank you guys for doing this. This is incredible. We never talk about this stuff so openly and forthrightly. What I wanted to just kind of bring up is PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is a big topic in the world of HIV, but not in Ireland. Just the two articles that GCN has run about it were very kind of skeptical, naysaying, very full of a lot of judgmental, moralistic stuff. Well, in particular, the second one, very disappointing. But one of the things that for me is really interesting about PrEP, beyond obviously the potential it has to dramatically reduce the number of new HIV infections, is that it also really challenges us to rethink what we mean when we talk about responsibility and intimacy and sex. Right now, there's sort of, the way that we talk about sex is if you don't use a condom, you're irresponsible. And then we pathologize that. We look for what sort of psychological problems are you having that would cause you to not use a condom for sex. And that actually makes it really difficult for people to be honest about what they're doing, be honest with themselves about why they're doing it. And it also, in terms of perpetuating stigma, it perpetuates this idea that anyone who does become infected is to blame. You were irresponsible, you did something wrong. And so, but I don't know. Anyway, that's some stuff.
Yeah, well, we also discussed PrEP in our preparation for it. I think PrEP, does anybody know what PrEP is actually? PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis. You already had PEP, that was post-exposure prophylaxis. That is PEP is a month-long treatment with HIV medications after you possibly had put yourself to risk of HIV. Pre-exposure prophylaxis, PrEP, is a drug. It's an HIV medication. I take it for my health as well, Truvada, but it's also been effective in preventing HIV. So a person who takes mostly now daily a Truvada pill can in this way prevent himself from getting HIV infected. And I think it's a beautiful way of getting the positive and negative communities together again, because there was also this status divide in the scene as well, where, well, bear with me, but where we all take the same precaution, one for himself to get not infected, and the other for staying healthy on PrEP as well. I think PrEP is also a very beautiful way for people not to have fear of getting HIV or infecting somebody with HIV. There's no fear of HIV in the bedroom. I think if PrEP gets there, also in Ireland. In the Netherlands, we have the discussion also. The local authorities are starting a trial if they can get the money together. Next year is possibly the date for high-risk populations, because PrEP costs a lot of money. So they're going to investigate it among a small group of gay men who who are mostly going to the STD clinic and have a STI. So guys who take sexual risks. But yeah, I'm very open for that, and I think it's all part of the slut shaming also. Like I said, we've been fearful of sex for 30 years now. We've been using condoms. Imagine what it can do for a person to have sex without a condom. You know, that's a common thing in the straight world, right? Straight people can have more sex without a condom because the virus is not that prevalent in certain circles and scenes. But when we have a unprotected sex or sex without a condom, the chance of getting HIV are higher, and that puts also a lot of burden on our shoulders and a responsibility as gay men as well. But 30 years of condom use hasn't prevented us from HIV. There's no end of HIV, so we need something else. 75%, that's a Dutch survey. 70 to 75% of the Dutch gay men use every time a condom when they have sex. That's self-reportage, so that's what people say themselves. So that's fine, if you can have wonderful sex, if you have anal sex, by the way, with a condom, that's fine. You should keep it that way. But for the guys who sometimes or usually don't use condoms, PrEP is a perfect, wonderful opportunity for themselves to get protected for HIV.
I wonder, to answer your question, partly answer your question, Andrew, is I totally agree with what Leo's saying. It's almost like a sort of a magical intervention. Well, it's a chemical, scientific intervention. But I wonder, is one of the reasons why it's not more widely discussed. Admittedly, it's fairly recent pharmaceutical intervention and practice. One of the reasons why it's not being discussed more readily is because of the sheer cost of it. Because, of course, PrEP involves taking a pill like the pill I take every day. And I asked my medic in James's how much my medication costs. I take one pill, it's great. It's €40 per pill every day for the rest of my life. And the state ponies up the cash to that. I mean, it's extraordinary. The pharmaceutical bill for St. James's Hospital, which is a research hospital, is €25 million a year. I mean, extraordinary amounts of money. But the future success of something like PrEP, and I think it has massive implications for people's behavior. It's also utterly dependent in the long run on people's adherence. And not unlike, you can persuade people, okay, this is a great way of ensuring that you don't become infected. But you could equally say, look, I'm going to give you a pill, and this will actually keep you alive and make sure that your viral load doesn't go through the roof. And again, I've had conversations with it depends on adherence. And adherence and good behavior depends on educating people about being responsible. So we're back to square one again when it comes to sort of rolling out relevant educational programs.
So can you please give a big, huge round of applause for Leo Schenk. And of course, the website is hellogorgeous.nl/English. And of course, the icon that is Tonie Walsh.